Tony doesn't acknowledge the fact that only Michigan and Georgia are ranked in the top 10 of every position group in the country. Only one Michigan is a wide receiver in this top 2025. I don't acknowledge that because that's the first time I was seeing that. And, I do have one of the magazines, and Michigan is all over the place. But being ranked in the top 10 of a position isn't being ranked in the top 1 of that position. And you kind of need to be the best to win it all. Now, you don't need to be the best in all of those. But I know earlier Justin said that, I say they don't have the talent to win a national championship. They're not built to win a national championship. I don't think they have the depth for it. I don't think they have the line of scrimmage, defensive line of scrimmage for it, and they don't have enough playmaking and skills and points. They can beat up on the Big Ten and throw a bunch of points on the board, but until they do it against a defense like Georgia, which is the final boss, that's who you're going to face. Like you can scream through all of these levels that you want, but it's the final boss. And once you're facing Mike Tyson and Tyson's Punch Out, eventually everything comes due. And I don't know that Michigan has the offense, because even Ryan Day has said it. Last year before the season, I think you got to score 50 points to win a playoff game. Like that's kind of what you need to do. And I don't see Michigan's offense having any chance of scoring 50 points against one of the nation's top 5 defenses, that is probably who you're going to end up playing. Now, do they have a bunch of good players? Yeah, good players aren't going to get you. You need great players. And if you're the 7th best group of linebackers and the 4th best group of defensive backs and the 5th best group of offense, that's great. But how are you against the best team in the nation? Because that's what you're going to be judged against. That's what Ohio State is judged against, and they failed last year. But I still, until I see more from Michigan, I don't believe they will have the talent to win a national championship unless something happens to a Georgia, like an upset. And then, I think things have to go just right for Michigan. Like Ohio State, I believe they can make their own luck. Now, they have not been lucky with some calls here and there in the playoffs. I think Ohio State has the talent and the aggression to make their own luck. Michigan, I think, needs more luck because they just don't have as much talent, even though, again, Steve Dace may disagree, Mark, with his talent quotient and things like that. I just don't think they have the explosive kind of talent that Ohio State has all over the place on offense.
And I think an objective Michigan fan would have to agree with you that Ohio State at its best, both last season and prior to, all you have to do is look at the Clemson playoff game, the Georgia playoff game, and there are other indications. No, they didn't win the game, and that's all that counts. Yes, we'll hear that argument, but we're talking about evaluating talent and performance, and there's a difference between those athletes and those teams that performed at that level against those teams. And what Michigan has done, with all due credit of what they've done inside the Big Ten, and specifically on the last Saturday of November the last 2 years, but those are two different types of games. And just to extend on Tony's point about Michigan, this is how I see it as well. It only makes sense that if there is an elite in college football, and has been, that we all know for the last 10 years or so, and then it drops considerably from there, where the 5th, 6th, 7th best teams in the country are clearly not as good as the top 2 or 3 or the number 1 team in the country. It only makes sense that when you look at position units, the 7th best, the 8th best unit in the country, if these rankings are accurate, but there is a 7th or 8th best unit in the nation, that although they're really good players and many of them will play in the NFL and all of that, they're not nearly as good by the same reasoning as the elite units in college football. And also just because you're, let's say, the number 1 quarterback or number 1 quarterback room in the Big Ten preseason, JJ McCarthy, and he's a good player and he's got a ton of talent, doesn't mean that all those number 1 and all those positions are created equal. You could have a bunch up of the top 4, and then you could have a drop, or you could have all sorts of different configurations. So those are just placeholders. They're not necessarily created equal, because JJ McCarthy, again, until I see more, he's not Bryce Young. So the number 1 quarterback spot in the Big Ten is not on par with the number 1 quarterback spot right now in the Pac-12 in Caleb Williams, for example.
Yeah, and Justin and Antoine going crazy over here. I didn't say Michigan can't score on good teams. They have to score on the best team. That's the problem. You have to score on the best team, and that's you can go back and look at Michigan's postseason history against the SEC, and the SEC is the best conference in college football. I think the last time they were able to score was in 2015 against Florida in their bowl game. Georgia has not treated them well. Alabama has not treated them well. That's who you're up against. I mean, that's who Ohio State has lost to in the playoffs. And of course, Michigan has also lost to Georgia in the playoffs in a much different fashion than Ohio State's lost to Georgia in the playoffs. Michigan is scoring 40 points a game against their schedule. That's what they're averaging. And they did it in the playoffs last year. It wasn't enough because the defense, they didn't have enough defense. And so if you don't have enough offense against the SEC and you don't have enough defense against the Big 12, what the hell are you doing?
Yeah, I think there's a difference, and I point this out all the time, a difference between if we're just going by the results, which, yes, bottom line, that's all that counts. That's all that counts. Then we don't have any discussion. The result is the result, whether you lost 42-41 or you lost, 31-0. It doesn't matter because the game's over and you lost. But we try to take it to the level of discussion and analysis of performance that is probably going to be is obviously a better judge of what's happened in the past, but also a projection toward what these programs truly are.
I know people are probably, the Ohio State fans are like, why are we talking so much about Michigan? But it's kind of where the journey has taken us. And I was reading in the chat, I think that Michigan could have scored on Georgia. What Michigan did well, and let's give Michigan Blake Corum. Let's say Blake Corum didn't get hurt and give them Blake Corum just so they're going in a little bit more full strength with its complement of weapons. What Michigan does well is what Georgia does the best job of taking away. Would Michigan have run the ball better against Georgia than Ohio State? Yeah, probably. Would Michigan have been able to run the ball against Georgia enough to it be a difference maker? Absolutely not, in my opinion. And you have J.J. McCarthy, who, certainly has his mobility. And, I'm probably not going to be a popular opinion with those guys. But, I mean, he is not the most refined passer. I mean, he really isn't. And so if Georgia loads the box, and Georgia really doesn't need to load the box to take away the run, but if Georgia loads the box, do you trust J.J. McCarthy is going to be able to get out there and sling it against Georgia's secondary, which was still a very good secondary? I don't think, we're not going to see the proficiency that we saw with C.J. Stroud and Marvin Harrison Jr. before he got hurt. So I have a really hard time saying that Michigan would be able to score with any sort of regularity or even impact in a game between those two teams in a neutral field in a college football semifinal, final, whatever, what have you. I don't see it. And while Michigan's defense certainly did a lot of things well last year, that damn Stetson Bennett, he's a sneaky little SHIT. So, it's I don't know. It would have to be a pretty big line for me not to take Georgia in that game.
Yeah. And Justin, keywords in your opinion. Yes, this is breaking. This is our opinions. These are our opinions. While you and Antoine are speaking in facts, we are just speaking in opinions.
Whatever the show was, it was the usual Ohio State Michigan crowd following us around and arguing Ohio State Michigan, and I just was amused, but at the same time, hey, thanks for being here, appreciate you being here. But they just never let up and never stop. And I just took 5 minutes to basically outline bragging rights. I think the bragging rights are extremely clear for each group of fans. And of course, I did that in vain. Nobody's going to pay attention and they'll just continue to argue. But I think it's very clear. Michigan's got 2 consecutive wins in the series. They've got 2 Big Ten championships in a row. That's what's going on right this second. What's going on historically, meaning like all time, unless you want to watch the 1998 Rose Bowl, anything that you find that Michigan has accomplished as being the best in the sport, you have to look at old pictures in black and white. You can't watch any film or video of it. It doesn't exist. We know it happened, but we can't enjoy watching it. Okay. But Michigan,
who said we would enjoy it?
Well,
Harry Truman was president.
Yes. So exactly. Yes, he was 1948. So those are facts. The fact is that Ohio State has been the superior program, and it's not debatable in the last 10 years, in the last 15 to 20 years, in the last 50 years. It's a good run, but Ohio State still just more NFL players, more national championships, more Big Ten championships. They've got the series lead in the last 50 years. They've got a better winning percentage. Shoot, they've got the best winning percentage in college football history, and in the last 50 years, and in the last 20 years. So there are your bragging rights. It's pretty clear cut.
Well, obviously, you can get your football PhD in 2 years, because all Michigan fans seem to think that they need to have doctor in front of their name.
But Mark, going back to your point about the olden days, like before these 2 years, all of the Michigan highlights that you would see, you'd have to hit the tracking button so that the VHS tape would line up, and you wouldn't have so many marks along the screen there.
Okay, Antoine. See, when we throw up the term "old," I don't know if Michigan had a national championship in 2014 that they would consider it this old ass trophy. I don't know that would be the terminology used. I kind of doubt it.
I think old ass trophies are better than half ass trophies, which is the 97 trophy.
And
I'd rather be pissed off than pissed on.
And absolutely, 2 consecutive wins, 2 consecutive Big Ten championships. That's what's going on right now.
Mm-hmm.
I just ranked all the programs 1 through 133. You could do that in a very systematic fashion. I did it kind of combination systematic and nuanced. And I wrestled with Ohio State and Michigan at 3 and 4. I really wrestled because I still, in my gut, believe Ohio State's a better program, but I wanted to acknowledge and recognize what's happened the last 2 years, and had to flip the switch to Michigan to say, I'll give them the nod 3 versus 4. Yes, it counts. Absolutely. It counts.